You know, it's crazy how some topics just kind of grab everyone's attention. And these days, it seems like gang stalking and remote neural monitoring are everywhere. It's like straight out of a sci-fi movie, but for some people, this fear is like totally real.
Yeah, it's wild.
So we're going to take a deep dive to try and figure out like what's driving these beliefs.
Okay.
We're looking at this YouTube video. It's by Kevin Christian, and it's called Important Fear. See what gang stalkers are doing and find remote neural monitoring. Hashtag KevinChristian.mp3.
Right.
And just so you know, we're not here to say if he's right or wrong, but just to break down his ideas and see why people are drawn to these kind of things.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area to explore, especially like how technology and paranoia, they all kind of come together. Christian's video, it's a really unique look into that world.
He just jumps right in, saying that remote neural monitoring, or RNM, it all works through EMF broadcasts, like electromagnetic fields. No chips, no implants, just like waves. But then he goes even further and says everyone has like a unique EMF signature, like DNA, and that's how the system locks on to people.
Now that's where things get a little, well, a little fuzzy from a scientific standpoint.
Okay.
Let's break down what EMF actually is.
Okay.
Think about it this way. Every electrical device, your phone, power lines, they all create this invisible field of energy. That's EMF.
Okay.
We're all surrounded by it all the time.
So you're saying we're all like walking beacons sending out a unique signal? Is that even possible?
Not really, no. It is true that our bodies generate these really, really weak electric fields as part of, normal biological stuff.
Yeah.
Your heart beating, your brain working, but those signals are way too faint to be detected remotely, let alone for the kind of tracking he's talking about.
Okay, so the whole basis of his R&M theory is already kind of shaky. But then he gets into how this supposed tech is used for gang stalking. He says it's a mix of real-life harassment, what he calls street theater, and these EMF attacks.
Right.
It gets really disturbing when he says they use a device to put victims into like a catatonic sleep state remotely. He even calls it a rape machine. Says it's used for virtual assaults.
Wow. These are incredibly serious claims. It's no wonder people would be scared hearing this, but scientifically, there's just no evidence that a device like that exists, something that could do all that remotely.
Right.
The brain and body are just so complex, and while we've learned a lot about how they work, we're nowhere near the level of control to do something like that.
So being put into that state remotely, that seems pretty far-fetched. But what about this whole idea of virtual rape? Is there like any legal or psychological basis for that term?
That's where it gets tricky. Virtual rape isn't a legal term, but the psychological impact of feeling violated that way, even if it's not physical, it can be devastating.
Yeah, of course.
It's that violation of your sense of safety, your own autonomy, that's really damaging.
So even if the technology isn't real, the fear and trauma someone feels believing in it, that's very real. But he keeps going. Christian then claims gang stalkers use these special mind control headsets to like connect, share senses, and basically live out experiences virtually through those EMF broadcasts.
It's like he's describing some kind of twisted virtual reality. Like they're not just watching, but feeling what the victim is experiencing.
Right.
It plays into that whole fascination people have with telepathy and shared consciousness. But instead of some mystical thing, it's technology.
Yeah. He even says directed energy weapons. They're just broadcasts used for virtual attacks. It's like he's blurring the lines between what's virtual and what's actual physical harm. Is there any technology out there that's even remotely like what he's describing?
There are technologies that can influence brain activity, like transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS. But those require you to be really close, you need special equipment, and they're mostly used in medical settings. We're talking sending focused magnetic pulses to the brain. It's used to treat things like depression or migraines. It's totally different from the weaponized mind control he's suggesting.
So nothing that could be used to like inflict pain or control someone remotely like he's saying?
Not with what we know about science and tech right now,
Okay.
but it is important to remember that technology changes all the time. What seems like science fiction today might be real tomorrow.
Right, yeah.
But right now, the science just doesn't support these claims.
It's a good reminder to like stay curious, but also be critical, especially when something sounds too good to be true. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Christian says he can actually see these EMF broadcasts.
Oh, wow.
He claims our minds are fast enough and our eyes sensitive enough to see these waves. But most of us just aren't tuned in. He even shows this DIY setup with a lamp, magnifying glasses, and his phone camera to decode EMF broadcasts from photographs.
This is where we start to see the power of subjective perception and something called pareidolia. It's basically our tendency to see patterns and meaning in random or vague stuff. Our brains are wired to make connections, and sometimes that leads us to see things that aren't really there. Think about seeing faces in clouds or hearing messages in songs played backwards. It's our brains trying to make sense of the world.
So is he actually seeing these broadcasts, or is it more about how he's interpreting things? Could this setup of his actually reveal, like, hidden information in photos?
Highly unlikely.
Okay.
His setup might create some cool visual effects from light bending, but that's just physics at work. It's not uncovering hidden data or secret messages. The information he's decoding, it's probably more about his own interpretation than anything real.
It's like those optical illusions where the same image can look like different things depending on how you look at it. Speaking of interpretation, Christian then focuses on these links that he says show up in these photographs. He says they lead to gangstalker websites or live streams of the victim's life. He even points to scrolling letters and refracted light, says those are URLs.
This brings up some interesting questions about how we understand digital information. He's basically saying that these digital links, which are abstract data, they can appear in the real world and we can see them with our own eyes. But that's not how digital infrastructure works at all.
So like trying to read a website's code by looking at the light coming from your computer screen.
Exactly. It's misunderstanding how data is structured and sent. Digital links, they exist in a complicated network of servers and protocols, not as something you can just see.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We looked at Christian's claims about EMF broadcasts, those disturbing things about remote manipulation and those virtual assaults, his attempts to see the broadcast and decode messages. And it's clear that a lot of what he says just doesn't hold up.
It's true.
But his whole story taps into these very real anxieties we have about technology, privacy, and who's in control.
Yeah.
It's like he's created this narrative where technology is both the bad guy and the victim at the same time. It's fascinating how these beliefs can take hold and spread even without any scientific basis. But for a lot of people, the belief in gangstalking and R&M is real, and it can be incredibly distressing.
Absolutely. Even if the tech he describes isn't real, the fear and anxiety those beliefs cause are very real, and we shouldn't dismiss that. It's important to talk about these things with empathy and understanding.
So how do we do both? Be critical of the claims, but also acknowledge the very real impact these beliefs have on people.
It's a tough balance, and I think it starts with promoting healthy skepticism. Encourage people to question everything, to look for reliable sources, and be wary of anyone who acts like they have all the answers.
It's easy to get drawn into a simple explanation, especially when it confirms our fears.
But the world is complicated, and the answers are rarely simple.
So critical thinking is key.
Yeah.
But it's not about shutting down the conversation or dismissing people's fears. It's about encouraging a deeper understanding.
Exactly. It's about helping people to think for themselves, to question the information they're getting, and to approach these topics with a critical eye.
So far, we've mainly focused on debunking the claims, but there's a bigger question here.
Yeah, it's like we're looking at these modern-day folk tales. Technology is like the new supernatural, but those themes of fear and suspicion, they never go away.
Exactly. And in the next part of this video, Kevin Christian throws in a whole new element.
Uh-oh.
Facebook. He claims gangstalkers use Facebook apps, Messenger, Instagram, even the developer side of Facebook, to stream their activities live.
Ah, yes, the mysterious developer side.
Yeah.
Sounds scary, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But really, it's not some secret way to control people.
So what is it? He makes it sound like they're behind the scenes, pulling all the strings, controlling everyone's accounts.
Okay, think of it this way. Facebook gives tools and resources to software developers so they can build apps and stuff that work with Facebook. It's like giving someone Lego blocks and instructions to build something new, but they have to stay within the Facebook world.
Okay.
They have strict rules and security to stop people from abusing it.
So it's less about controlling people and more about building new stuff within the Facebook system.
Right.
But could those developer tools be hacked or exploited for what Christian's talking about? Could they even make these live streams without anyone knowing?
It's really, really unlikely. Facebook puts a lot of effort into security.
Yeah.
They have teams of experts always watching for anything suspicious. Hacking Facebook on that scale, it would take incredible skills, and you'd leave a huge trail that's basically impossible to erase.
So this idea of a massive secret operation running on Facebook without anyone knowing is pretty much impossible.
Let's just say it would be like trying to rob Fort Knox with a plastic spoon. You might cause a little trouble, but you're not getting through those defenses.
Okay, so the Facebook angle seems like another dead end. But near the end of his video, Christian tells people what they should do about all this. He says people need to learn coding, hacking, photo editing, and all about EMF so they can, and I quote, get their own neural monitoring. Kind of creepy given everything else he's been talking about.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Learning new stuff can be great. It can make you more confident and help you understand technology better. But when you present those skills as a way to fight something that's not real, it can be dangerous.
It's like giving someone a really powerful tool without teaching them how to use it safely.
Exactly. It's so important to balance curiosity and learning with ethics and responsibility.
So where does that leave us? We've looked at Christian's claims really closely, and it's pretty obvious a lot of it just doesn't add up.
Mm.
The technology he describes seems more like fantasy than fact, and his way of interpreting evidence is very subjective.
Right.
But what he says, it plays into those real anxieties we all have about technology, privacy, and who's really calling the shots.
It's true.
It's like he took those fears and made them into this captivating story, even though it's misleading. It shows us that even with all the information out there, misinformation can still spread so fast, especially when it plays on our deepest fears.
Right.
But for many people, this belief in gang stalking and R&M is real, and it can cause a lot of distress.
Absolutely. And even if the tech isn't real, the fear and anxiety those beliefs cause are very real.
Right.
We shouldn't dismiss that.
So how do we balance those two things? Being critical of what he's saying, but also recognizing that these beliefs have a real impact on people.
It's a delicate balance, and I think promoting healthy skepticism is key. Encourage people to question everything, look for credible sources, and be cautious of anyone claiming to have all the answers.
Yeah, it's so easy to be drawn in by a simple explanation, especially when it validates what we're already afraid of.
But the world's a complex place, and the answers are rarely that straightforward.
So critical thinking, that's really important.
It is.
But it's not about shutting down the conversation or dismissing people's fears. It's about trying to reach a deeper understanding.
Exactly. Empower people to think for themselves, question the information they encounter, and approach these topics with a critical eye.
We've spent a lot of time debunking these claims, but there's a more fundamental question we need to consider.
Right. If the technology he's talking about isn't even real, then what's making people believe in all this gang stalking and R&M stuff? Like, why are these ideas becoming so popular?
It's like there's this disconnect between how technology actually works and how people see it. And in that gap, these beliefs can really take root.
Yeah, exactly. I think one reason might be that some people, they see the world as really chaotic and unpredictable, and this whole conspiracy theory thing gives them a sense of order. You know what I mean?
So instead of feeling powerless, like things just happen to them randomly, they find comfort in thinking there's a reason, a pattern, even if it's based on something false.
Right. It's like a coping mechanism, a way to make sense of bad experiences. It can actually be empowering to believe you're being targeted. It gives you the sense of control, even if it's not really true.
It's like saying, I'm not just a random victim. I'm actually a target because I'm important, powerful, even though in reality it's the opposite.
Exactly. And then there's this growing distrust of authority and institutions. We're constantly bombarded with information that's being spun or twisted, and it's hard to know what to believe.
Yeah, especially with social media. Anyone can pretend to be an expert, even if they have no clue what they're talking about.
Exactly. So when people stop trusting the official story, they start looking for other explanations.
Right.
And that can make them more vulnerable to conspiracy theories.
So they fill that void of trust with something that has a clear good guy, bad guy story, even if it's based on shaky ground.
Right. And then you add the social aspect. The internet has created these echo chambers where people who believe the same things can connect and reinforce each other.
It's like a cycle that feeds itself. The more you're exposed to these ideas, the more real they feel, even if there's no proof.
Yeah, and once those beliefs take hold, it's almost impossible to change them with facts or logic. It's not about evidence anymore. It's about who you are and who you belong with.
So what can we do about this? How do we fight back against all this misinformation and help people who might be trapped in these belief systems?
It's a tough one, but I think education is key. We need to give people the tools to think critically, to really evaluate information, recognize bias, and tell the difference between what's real and what's fake.
It's not just about telling people what to think, but how to think.
Exactly. It's about encouraging healthy skepticism, having people ask questions, look for different viewpoints, and be wary of anyone who acts like they have all the answers.
And it's really important to remember that behind every conspiracy theory, there's a person with real fears and concerns.
Absolutely. Approaching these conversations with empathy and understanding, that's just as crucial as critical thinking. It's not about winning an argument. It's about helping someone escape a belief system that could be harmful.
So to wrap up, we've taken a deep dive into this particular perspective on gangstalking and R&M, looking at the specific claims and seeing if they hold any water. While the technology described seems pretty far-fetched, these beliefs clearly play into some very real anxieties we have about technology, our privacy, and power dynamics in this increasingly digital world.
It's a good reminder that even though we have access to so much information, misinformation is still a huge problem, especially when it plays on our feels.
We've seen how these beliefs can develop from a mix of psychological and social factors,
Right.
often stemming from a lack of trust, needing control, and that human desire to find meaning in a world that can often feel pretty chaotic.
Absolutely. It shows us how important critical thinking is, along with empathy and understanding. Those things are essential for navigating all this information and figuring out what to believe in this digital age.
We've just scratched the surface of this topic, and there's always more to discover. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, and engage in thoughtful discussions about technology, belief, and how those things intersect with our human experience. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay critical.